Food is my preferred way to kind of navigate my memories. Sometimes I don't always remember exactly what happened or where I was, but if I think about what I ate, it just brings me right back. I love rice pudding. It was something I ate all the time growing up. My great-grandmother always had the cozy shack. She had the little cups in the fridge all the time, and when we would go see her, you could, pick one out of the fridge, and it was great. This is just, a homemade version of that. I am Julia Turshen. I'm the author of a few cookbooks, all books to empower home cooks. My latest is called Now and Again. It's all about my love of leftovers. And at the end of the book, I included a bunch of lists for things to do with everything from leftover wine, which some people say doesn't exist, to leftover rice, which is, I think, the thing that most people have in their fridge kind of at all times, a leftover carton from takeout or whatever it might be. So here is the list, 7 things to do with leftover cooked rice. And I'm gonna make the last one, which is brown sugar rice pudding. And we're gonna sweeten it with some dried fruit and serve it with fresh fruit. What's cool about it is that lots of leftover rice recipes, there's, leftover fried rice. But I think kind of thinking beyond the sort of savory and taking something like rice and turning it into dessert is a really fun way to celebrate the kind of transformative power of leftovers. And starting with cooked rice means you're already, like more than halfway there. You've done the hard part. Okay, so to make it, you start with leftover rice. This is like 2 cups, just dry from the fridge. And then equal parts, just whole milk, which you should not cry over. And yeah, this is just regular milk, but you could totally use coconut milk or almond milk, whatever kind of milk you like to make it vegan, no problem. But it's super forgiving. It's like very, very hard to mess this up. You're basically just simmering leftover rice in milk. That's kind of it. And then you can sweeten it as much or as little as you like. And then I'm just gonna turn the heat up. I'm gonna put a pinch of salt, not to make it salty, but just to help season it. And basically, this milk and rice, right now it looks really like milk soup, just with rice in it, but letting it cook for about 15 minutes, it's just gonna let all that natural starch from the rice kind of get into the milk. The milk will reduce a little bit and it'll make it a little bit thicker. What's cool is you're basically, making this great dessert, but this also could totally be breakfast. I mean, there's not really a big difference between this and oatmeal. So while that is simmering, I'm gonna cut up some prunes, aka dried plums. I love prunes. I'm kind of secretly like an 80-year-old man stuck inside my body. They're delicious and they have so much flavor, and they're also really naturally really sweet. So when I add them, it'll help sweeten the rice pudding, add a little bit of texture and just like a little extra flavor. I'll cut like a small one in half and these bigger ones in quarters. You can use any dried fruit, apricots, dried apples, and then fresh apples at the end. So while your rice and milk are simmering and just getting really thick, it's a good time to, chop up your dried fruit. I'm gonna chop up the fresh plums to go on top. So I'm gonna slice these guys. I feel like one of the most important things that I try to convey is that cooking should be really doable. It should be accessible. You don't need fancy tools or a lot of money or a ton of time. I think the original slow cooker was a fire pit and great food has come from that. So a really great home cooked meal is an impressive thing, and you don't need to, climb a mountain to achieve that. All right, much thicker. And give it like 1 more minute and then we can go in. Oh, I should do my little egg. So this egg, I'm gonna fold in at the end, and the heat from the hot rice and milk will cook it, so you're not eating raw egg. And it's gonna totally thicken the rice pudding in this really, really beautiful way. If you are making a vegan version, just leave it out, not a big deal. Okay, I think we're ready for the additions. So I'm gonna add a little bit more milk, because that original milk just kind of helped to draw out all that starch and everything. And then this little extra addition of milk will just sort of like make it just beautifully creamy at the end. And it's also gonna bring down the temperature a little bit, which is good when I add the egg, because it won't scramble. These are those prunes. And then brown sugar, like half a cup. Stir that in before I add the egg. You could use maple syrup, you could use honey. If you're being mindful about sugar, you could skip the sugar. Brown sugar makes it like a really gorgeous like butterscotch kind of color. It also gives it all that butterscotch caramel flavor, which is really nice. Between the dried plums and the brown sugar, it almost smells like whiskey. It's got like this really, really rich smell. It smells very long cooked, which is why I love using ingredients like dried fruit or brown sugar, things that already have that flavor, because they taste like something really rich and that took a lot of time, but it didn't take you a lot of time, which is really nice. Okay, so once the brown sugar is broken up, I'm gonna add that egg. And I'm gonna add it while I'm stirring. Again, you just don't wanna get any kind of like scrambled egg. You just want this to blend in and make it thick and creamy. Okay, I'm gonna turn off the heat. And then the last thing I'm gonna add is a little bit of vanilla, which I like adding off the heat because it will really retain all the flavor. It's not gonna kind of like cook off. So a little bit of that. And then lastly, just a little bit of butter, just because why not? It just makes it really rich and delicious. And again, if you were doing kind of like a vegan version with coconut milk or whatever, you could just leave that out. Okay, so that little bit of butter and vanilla at the end, it smells so good. It smells almost like when you walk into an ice cream parlor and it sort of smells like waffles cooking and ice cream being churned or something. Whatever that smell is, that's what this is. So I'm just stirring until that butter melts and everything's really incorporated. And at this point, it's gonna look like on the looser side. If you chill this and serve it cold, it's gonna get so much thicker in the refrigerator because all the starch from the rice and everything will just make everything, I'm trying to think of a nicer word than congealed, but basically that's what will happen. If you do serve it cold, now would be the time if you put it in little serving bowls and then chill it. And then that also makes it kind of a great thing if you're entertaining because you can make it ahead. Not only can you, but you actually need to so that it cools down. I like it warm. It's like a rice pudding, like soup, I guess. Like it's just like such a cozy thing to eat, especially if it's really cold outside. So ready to go. I'm gonna bowl. Sometimes it's really nice served warm with some cold whipped cream on top. It's sort of a nice kind of temperature contrast. So I'm gonna top it with some of these fresh plums so you get that nice dried plum, fresh plum thing, and that's that. So here's something great you can do with leftover rice that's not savory, it's not, you know, an expected kind of fried rice. It's something totally different and also just really comforting and familiar at the same time. So I'm gonna try and get a bite with a little dried plum and fresh plum. It's still really hot. That's so good. I feel like rice pudding is like a hug in the form of a dessert. It's just like the most comforting thing. I would be so happy if I went to someone's house and they serve this for dessert. I feel like it's not something you see in a restaurant very often, but it's so good and it's such a homey thing. But I think the ideal situation would be my wife and I have just had friends for dinner. We've sat at the table, but now we're all sitting on the couch, you know, in front of the fireplace, and both my dogs are next to me, like on either side, and then I have a bowl of this, and I just feel like that would be the best. It would. I'm like, we're gonna have to do that this weekend.